Thanks for joining us on the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast. Today we're excited to have Didier Toubia from Aleph Farms on this episode. I had a great discussion with Didier and there was some background noise during the recording. Our audio engineers did a great job to minimize it. However, some of it is still present, but the content was so good that we didn't want to cut out any of the discussion. Before we get started, I wanted to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Radical Snacks. They're giving us a 20% discount through October if you use the coupon code FUTUREFOODS on their website at www.radicalsnacks.com. That's the botanical spelling of radical ending in ICLE. There are a lot of great cultured meat and biotech events coming up, including the Good Food Conference, which is sold out. They have a sign-up available for their live stream, so check out www.goodfoodconference.com. The Good Food Institute has been a tremendous help to our show. Special thanks to Brad Barbera and David Welch from Series 1. If you haven't checked out their episodes, please do so. Our team is putting together the Cultured Meat Symposium in San Francisco on November 1st. Tickets are available now and they're selling out fast. We'll be covering all aspects of cultured meat, following the themes of impact, future, and flavor. Learn more and get your tickets at www.cms18.com for the Cultured Meat Symposium. New Harvest is expanding their team and hiring several positions in the New York City area. New Harvest is a nonprofit organization covering all things cellular agriculture. To learn more about their open positions, please visit www.new-harvest.org. Didier Toubia is a biologist and food engineer by education. Aleph Farms is part of the cellular agriculture revolution, the production of agricultural products from cell cultures, and their first product is a sustainable, healthy, and ethical bovine cultured meat. Didier has been instrumental in bringing several innovative life science products to the global market. He served as NLT Spine's CEO, a VC-backed startup successfully sold to NASDAQ-listed C-Spine. During his 6 years as CEO, Didier raised over $20 million, opened the U.S. operations, and led a co-development with Johnson & Johnson. Prior to that, Didier co-founded and served as the CEO of IceCure Medical, a VC-backed fast-growing medical device company which successfully went public on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. He served as the partner at the life sciences practice of Kuckerman & Co. Investment House. Didier started his career as a researcher in biochemistry and microbiology at the food department of the ARO Volcani Center. Didier holds a Master's of Engineering in Biology, Biotechnology, and Food Engineering from AgroSup Dijon in France, including a thesis at the Technion Institute of Technology in Israel, and an International Executive MBA from the Kellogg School of Management from Northwestern University and the Reconati Graduate School of Business Administration in Tel Aviv. Didier is a co-inventor of 40-plus patents and has raised over $45 million in total. Didier, I'd like to welcome you to the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
Didier, please tell us a little bit about yourself, Aleph Farms, and your motivation to work on clean meat.
Yes, I'm a food engineer and biologist by education, and I've been always involved with projects and companies with a purpose, either in the field of food or medical devices. So for me, clean meat is really the best way to combine my background as a biologist, as a food engineer, together with a clear purpose for humanity and for the planet.
So, have you eaten clean meat? And if yes, tell us a little bit about your experience.
I haven't eaten clean meat yet. We're still working on our prototype at Aleph Farms, which should be ready toward the end of this year. So that should come very soon, and we'll make sure we update you and the audience on the first public testing of Aleph Farms clean meat.
Tell us a little bit about how Aleph is different and really what kind of meat Aleph Farms is working on, and if you're working on any complex structures other than just ground beef or ground meat.
Aleph Farms is definitely different than other clean meat companies, and I'll explain why. We believe that clean meat is facing two key challenges for really driving large acceptance and a wide use of clean meat globally. The first one is cost and scalability, and I assume each of the companies in the field do have some strategy to address that issue. At Aleph Farms, we do have a very systematic method we have developed for driving costs down based on a different bioreactor approach, our own serum-free medium, and other aspects of cell biology we are implementing at that stage. And the second main challenge for clean meat, we believe, is to have an attractive product. We believe that clean meat should be an experience, should be emotional, and not just a raw material for processed food. And that's where the key difference between Aleph Farms and other companies is coming in. We have acquired from the Technion in Israel, in the north of the country, license on a platform for three-dimensional culture of 4 different types of cells, co-culture of all the cells which are composing the traditional formed meat we know, meaning muscle fibers together with the fat, with the connective tissue and blood vessels, and in a way which enables us to obtain a structured and a textured tissue at the end of the process, which is much more similar to the formed meat we're used to purchase and to eat on a day-to-day basis. So that's really a key difference between Aleph Farms and the competition. And as far as we're aware, we're the only company today which has already grown and which has a proof of concept for connective tissue and blood vessels.
That connective tissue, it doesn't grow in a particular shape, for example, like in the shape of a ribeye steak, but it would have the same consistency. Is that right?
Yes, the idea is to mimic formed meat much better. Connective tissue is actually the part of the meat which holds the tissue together and which provides a large part of the structure of the tissue. Structure is very important for many reasons, both for the sensory properties of the meat and also for the ability to provide a thick meat and an end product much closer to a steak. And blood vessels are very important, not only because of the taste, but also because they have a role in as a net, as a scaffolding for the end tissue. So they also have a role in the texture and the structure of the meat.
There's a lot of successful companies coming out of Israel, both tech companies and also biotech companies working on clean meat. Do you see Israel as a clean meat hub?
Yes, I assume we can call Israel a clean meat hub. And I believe the reasons are, first, because in Israel we have a very high level of expertise in stem cells. And actually, that's an expertise and a know-how which is very useful for developing clean meat companies. For some regulatory reasons, Israel has been much more open to the stem cells industry than the US or Europe. So you can find in the country human resources and you can access know-how which is relatively unique globally. On top of that, Israel is very active as a vegan community and very organized as a vegan community. So there is a lot of entrepreneurs here who are trying to promote and to develop alternatives to meat. And finally, Israel is known for its entrepreneurship spirit. We have here a lot of startups and a lot of thinking out of the box approaches and a lot of entrepreneurs willing and ambitious for changing the world and for transformative technologies. Israel is known as the startup nation, as you may have heard before. And so the combination of all those aspects, meaning expertise in stem cells, very structured vegan community, and entrepreneurship spirit, makes Israel a great environment for clean meat startups to grow and to develop.
There's probably a lot of stem cell programs in the different universities compared to other countries. Would you say that's true?
Yes, in the university, but also in the industry setup, meaning in companies, which is relatively unique. Regarding the universities, we are partnering with the Technion, as I mentioned before, in the north of Israel, more specifically with the lab of Professor Levenberg, who is known as one of the leading researchers in the field of tissue engineering. She's actually graduated from the Weizmann Institute and has a postdoc from MIT with Professor Bob Langer. We have other very advanced technologies in other universities. For instance, Professor Nechmias in the Hebrew University is also connected with Future Meat, another clean meat company. But beyond that, we also have a lot of experience of applying stem cells and cell cultures to medical applications, which serves the clean meat industry as well, and which brings in a lot of know-how and experience on the operational level. As we mentioned before, the first challenge for clean meat is scale-up and a cost, which are more operational issues associated with the technical and scientific challenges, but very connected to operations. The VP R&D we have hired at Aleph Farms, Dr. Neta Lavon, comes from Kadimastem, which is a public company working on stem cells treatments for ALS, for medical applications in human. And she has a lot of experience in scaling up stem cells production, in building up operations, including clean environments, clean rooms, and bioreactors. So the combination of that high level of science and technology coming out from the university and the ability to pick talents from the medical community, from companies who do have some track record in implementing stem cells practically, is quite unique to Israel and grants us a lot of resources and access to a lot of resources which are quite unique in the world.
In addition to that, I was just thinking, like, when you're working with a lot of different universities, is it difficult to manage intellectual property or IP, or are the agreements pretty open, and is it flexible for a private company to work with universities when it comes to IP?
Israel is quite experienced in tech transfer, technology transfer from university to the private sector, meaning that most of the universities do have some relatively straightforward approach and practical approach for transferring their technologies to startups or other private companies. So it's working quite well. That's obviously not free of challenges, and there are always, negotiation may take time. We acquired a license from the Technion for applying into clean meat all the know-how and the IP Professor Levenberg has developed for medical applications, and we find it relatively easy to work with them. Professor Levenberg does have a very practical and down-to-earth approach as far as research is concerned, and we're actually working in very close relationship. We have 3 researchers working for us directly at her lab under our joint guidance, on the top of the researchers working at our own lab in the Weizmann Science Park in Rehovot.
So let's talk a little bit about antibiotics. Do we need to add antibiotics when making clean meat? And if so, how do we really get rid of this? How do we eliminate the need for it in cell cultures?
Our goal is to develop a process for growing our meat with no need for antibiotics in a clean setup, in clean conditions. And I believe that will really be a huge advantage of clean meat. So to your question, we do not need antibiotics, and we'd like to offer a clean meat which would be clean of antibiotics, of contamination, and of other bad things people or consumers prefer not to see in their meat. On top of that, if we're talking about food safety, I think that a key advantage of clean meat, which has been spoken so much so far, is the fact that clean meat is fully transparent and traceable. Today, the meat industry, especially the beef industry in Europe, in the US, is suffering for lack of transparency and difficulty for tracing the origins of the end products you can find at the butchery. As you know, consumers today are looking for products they know where they come from, and if it's meat, how it has been fed and where, and which processes they've gone through. and that's very challenging today. So clean meat is really, in our views, solving a key issue, the meat today, especially beef, which is the meat we're dealing with at that stage, and for no contamination, no antibiotics, and for full transparency and the traceability.
When we're thinking about consuming clean meat in the future, what do you think the distribution will be like? For example, are the existing animal agriculture farms going to cease to exist in a future where clean meat is the norm, or will they still have some sort of part in it? Or maybe will they be involved in creating clean meat? Or how do you think that the distribution aspect will work? And on that note, a lot of people refer to creating clean meat like brewing beer, such that there will be breweries making beer, you have a bioreactor creating clean meat. Do you think that we'll have these big clean meat factories, or will the animal agriculture industry shift to creating clean meat?
We're working on a strategy for having the farmers involved in the process. We believe that the role of the farmers is to feed the world. So producing meat one way or another should involve the farmers one way or another. We do not see at that stage in the foreseeable future clean meat as a full substitute to farm meat. Our approach is that clean meat will probably coexist and live together with farm meat for the mid to long term. We'd like to see clean meat replacing, for instance, some factory farming practices, which are the most problematic methods for producing meat today. I assume that high-end, high-quality grass-fed cows will continue to be ground in the world. So we do see some integration between clean meat and the traditional meat industry. And that's a strategy we're working on at those weeks. So we will probably go out and talk about that a bit more in the next few weeks.
This is the question that everyone wants to answer to, and nobody likes to give an answer to. But when do you expect we'll be able to buy clean meat in the supermarkets?
As far as Aleph Farms is concerned, we plan a limited launch of a first product sometime in 2021, meaning in 3 years from now. I assume that some other companies may come to the market slightly earlier, probably 2020. The first product will probably be relatively expensive and might focus on food services or restaurants as a first go-to-market step. So supermarkets may come a bit later as a second step of market penetration. So to your question, it will be progressive rollout by some companies starting probably 2020, and it might take a few more years for clean meat to really reach the shelves and the supermarkets. It will probably not be at day one, but following some initial market penetration steps.
So we have a question from one of our listeners. Chad from Indiana asks, what is the best way to get into the clean meat industry if you are currently not in biotech?
That's a good question. I think that one aspect of the key success factors of clean meat is the go-to-market, developing the right product for the right consumers. Obviously, we're not targeting only the vegan or vegetarian community, but rather the flexitarians segment of the market or wider segment of the market. And so the idea is really to better to plan well the market entry strategy, distribution, the concept we're building around clean meat, the regulatory path. So there are a lot of aspects which are not directly biotech, which are more on the marketing and regulatory sides of clean meat. So if Chad, you're not biotech guy, I think that you could have some value or some input to the industry from other angles as well.
What can we expect to see from you or Aleph Farms in the near future?
We'll probably have a new release on the advancement of the company in the next few weeks, in the course of June or beginning of July. So I'm inviting you to stay tuned and to wait for it. We'll probably be exhibiting at the Future Food Tech in New York on the 19th and 20th of June. So you're invited to come and see us in New York. And beyond that, we'll probably have some publicly available information about the products toward the end of this year, around probably December 2018. And we'll communicate a bit more actively around the direction we're taking with the products and the unique path we're going for getting to the market in 2021, as I mentioned earlier.
So you can get in touch with Didier on LinkedIn and learn more about Aleph Farms at www.aleph-farms.com. Didier, do you have any last insights for our listeners?
We are talking a lot about clean meat as a great vision for humanity, for the planet, for animals. I think that we have not to forget that for clean meat to stay and to develop as a significant market, the product has to be good, meaning we have to make sure that the products will be priced reasonably, that the value will be significant enough for the consumers, that the products will provide real benefits, either in terms of quality or perceived quality, in terms of solving real issues with the industry. Like we've mentioned, no antibiotics, no contamination, full transparency. At the end of the day, we have not to forget that when the consumer is the average consumer, we're not going just for small segments of the markets like vegans. If we target a larger mass market, the consumer is making a purchase. Its purchasing decision is based on his preference on the same day at the same time. He's not necessarily acting or buying a product just because of the long-term vision for sustainability or animal welfare. So the success of clean meat will be dependent on providing a good product, good quality, good price, solving real problems, which are problems now, and not only selling a vision. We should make sure we combine the long-term vision with a short-term product strategy in a way which would be balanced and which will make clean meat successful in the long term.
Didier, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story on the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast.
Thank you.
This is your host, Alex, and we look forward to being with you on our next episode.